This is Creativity Drill with Dr. Don and Jonathan Rundman.
Hey, everybody. This is Jonathan Rundman, your co-host. And our guest today is Jake Armerding. He is a singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, virtuoso fiddler, producer, and road warrior. And man, Jake is just a wealth of inspiration and wisdom and practical application. And I'm really glad he was a guest, and I think you're just going to love it, especially if you are in the music business or if you are a songwriter. And really anybody who's making art would do well to pay attention to the wise words of Jake Armerding. I was just looking online at the South by Southwest schedule. Oh. And I was wondering, in all of your adventures, have you ever been there?
You know, I never have. I've always thought that it would probably that I'd just be lost in the shuffle.
Yeah,
like it's always sounded so incredibly like chaotic and overwhelming as far as how many bands are there.
Yeah,
whatever. That's I think I've been scared off by that.
Yeah. How about Folk Alliance? Have you ever been to that?
I have been to Folk Alliance. I've been to Folk Alliance a few times, but
that's happening right now as we speak.
Yeah, no, I've got friends there. In fact, I'm keeping up on social media with the manager of Club Passim.
Oh yeah,
has made the trek to Kansas City, I guess it is now, to participate in Folk Alliance. And let me see, I think I was there in 03, 04, 05 maybe.
Oh, okay.
And then so, you know, a while back now.
Yeah, and this is the national one?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Now, have you done the New England one? Because that's also quite...
I think I did that once. That was a ways back as well.
Yeah.
Part of it was, I remember them announcing that they were going to stop moving the conference around the country, like picking a different site. Yeah. Kind of like the Olympics.
Yep.
And they were just going to stick with one location, which I think was Memphis.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, I mean, I like Memphis as much as the next guy, but
maybe more.
Yeah, maybe more. But I think when I heard that, I was my reaction was sort of like, meh.
So it appealed to you more if you could get around a little bit.
Oh yeah, I loved like 1 year. I remember 1 year, maybe it was 04. It was actually held in Montreal, and I'd never been to Montreal, and that was really fun just to leave the country.
Yeah, the first time I ever did it was in Vancouver, BC, and I was playing with Becky Hemingway.
Oh, that sounds great.
And that was really, really cool.
Well, it's sort of like it's almost like a college trip in that you're hanging out with lots of your colleagues and friends, and yet you're going somewhere sort of slightly exotic and remote, at least.
Right.
So that was part of the fun for me. And then 1 year was in San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
That was nice. Yeah.
Were you appearing as Jake Armerding, the artist, or were you in one of your many collaborative roles?
I think I was sort of flying solo.
Yeah.
But you know, we were doing lots of teaming up.
Yeah.
Over the weekend.
I think the collaborating, all the people sitting in with one another is really cool.
Oh yeah.
Especially at Folk Alliances. That's a great spirit of people jamming. It's a real. The times I've been struck at that it's really folky. That convention,
yes.
They're not kidding.
No, they're
Those
not.
people are hardcore folkies.
Yes, they are.
And
is that okay with you?
It's perfectly okay with me. It's not quite as much my scene as maybe, and it's funny that I say this because I've never been there, but I would think that the Americana conference, might dial in a little closer with, I don't know, kind of where I like to live musically. But again, I say that, and I've actually never attended the conference, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
I went to the Midwest Folk Alliance last year, or a year.
Sort of the regional
one. It was in St. Louis.
I think I remember seeing that you did that.
Yeah. And
you came back from that, and you said, that's not quite my people.
It was fun, and there were really great artists there. I don't want to diss it, but it was it was not my. That was not my scene.
I think that was part of why I stopped going. Apologies to any
diehard folkies.
Yeah, well, Folk Alliance, administrative types amongst
You'd
our
still go.
listenership.
Worthy to ask, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think what kind of would bring me down a little bit there, and I went for 3 straight years. What was tough was feeling like everyone was trying to grab a piece of the folk music pie, which is just such a small pie. It's sort of like you had this intense competition for a pie that wasn't all that sizable, and there was something about that was just, I don't know, a little discouraging for me. To the kind of, and I'm not saying it was nearly as cutthroat as some other scenes I've been a part of,
right?
But there was sort of this pervasive, not desperation, but just a kind of like, the conference vibe was hard for me because at least 10 years ago, this is the way I looked at it. You're basically just trying to stand out amongst your peers and your colleagues and your fellows and get noticed more than they are.
Yeah.
And yet it's sort of like everybody there is also trying to do the same thing. I mean, certainly there's buyers there. There's people who are involved with various festivals and various venues. And like I just mentioned, Matt Smith is there from Club Passim, and I'm sure he's going and trying to see what music might impress him so he can book somebody for next year.
Yep.
But it seemed like the vast majority of people were like me. They were trying to sell themselves.
Right.
They weren't buying anything, they were selling.
Oh, totally. That's 98%.
Right. And so the market is so lopsided that the best parts for me were just the parts hanging out with friends.
Yeah, if you've got friends to hang with, then it's fun.
It was fun.
If you can put the hustle on the back burner and just enjoy the company,
right?
Then that is fun. But if you're there alone and you don't know anybody and you're just hustling, then I think it's kind of depressing.
It's a little depressing, and also there's just the whole hustling side of things. Like I think you have a real gift for that. Like you're able to do it in a very like natural way that never feels sort of that
oily?
never feels schmoozy or oily, sure. Whereas I feel like I'm just kind of awkward about it.
Yeah.
It's so tough to just sort of say like, the equivalent of like, hey, I'm really good, listen to me,
you should
kind of a
book
thing.
Me.
Right.
Not that
right.
guy.
The best thing to do is to try to get representation, so at least someone else is saying that about you.
Yeah. I'm thinking already of our listeners. Whenever we do this podcast, my one foot is always in the shoes of the people who are listening, in my own mind,
That's probably a good approach.
And I know that there are lots and lots of artists, musicians and songwriters who have thought to themselves, should I go to South by Southwest? Should I go to Folk Alliance?
Right.
Should I go to an industry conference? And, there's no right or wrong answer to that question.
But probably not.
But, not. Here's one thing I learned at Folk Alliance. And maybe it's the same is true maybe with other things. But Folk Alliance specifically, I think there are two kinds of artists in music and maybe in other showbiz too. And one is artists that make a really strong first impression. Mm-hmm. In a very short period of time. Mm. And then there are other artists who might be equally legit and equally good or talented who are like investment artists or growers or,
like those albums that you don't like at first and then they're kind of a slow burn.
Right. And I think those conferences are great if you are the kind of artist who is like virtuosic, perhaps, or highly unusual or highly visually interesting or appealing, or like incredibly sexy, or, you know what I mean? Or like really exotic. Or
I know what you mean.
Or if you have like weird instruments, you know what I mean? Or, so if you visually or audio
something particularly unique
that just commands attention.
Sure.
in a huge room of musicians, like if you stand out, then that's the kind of event that you should go to. But like I realized when I was there, I'm not that guy because I don't have that kind of singing voice.
Right.
And I'm playing solo most of the time, and I'm like a middle-aged, Midwestern dude with a guitar, and there's just like so many guys like that.
Right.
So I'm not the kind of person who can grab attention when I'm competing against other people who are just like virtuosic or else just visually unbelievable.
Right.
So
it's kind of like, maybe it's similar to how, well, I guess it has to do with attention, the kind of attention you're getting from what it is you're doing. And it's sort of like, it was really interesting last year to watch a friend of mine, and just a wonderful singer and songwriter, a guy named Joshua Davis, compete on not American Idol. I guess it was The Voice last year. He was on The Voice.
Oh my gosh.
And he made it really far. I think he almost made it to the end. Like I think he got third or something like that.
Wow.
And he was the first guy. I mean, of course I tuned in more knowing that he was on. But I felt like he was one of the only guys I had seen who wasn't taking what I would call, I guess, sort of like the bombastic approach, where like you sort of get to that part in the song and you just sing really high and really loud.
Yeah.
And you throw your head up in the air and you just sing this killer note and everyone cheers.
Yeah.
Like that seems to me to sort of be this sort of the default setting for most of those vocal talent shows. The belters, right?
Yeah,
the belters are the ones who instantly command attention because like they've got this big voice or whatever. And Josh Davis is not like that. He's sort of more of a crooner, but he's great. He's just fantastic. And I guess he was able to sell that enough to sort of get to the end, almost to the end of the whole competition. But in general, that kind of thing doesn't get enough attention. It mostly it doesn't deliver enough fast enough.
Yeah.
It's just there's no moment where you can say like, oh, this artist is loud and has a big voice.
Yeah.
And I find that tends to grab more attention, and so it sells better.
Right.
And I'm not that artist either. I'm more like Josh if I'm lucky. Mm-hmm. Where, it's more. I hope it never beats you over the head. It's more something that requires you listening to, and then again, if I'm lucky, it sort of draws you in. Mm-hmm. So it requires an effort on the part of a listener. Mm-hmm. I think there's lots of music that doesn't really require an effort. It's just really entertaining. It's really enjoyable and pleasing in whatever way that is. But it doesn't require any effort.
Yeah, it's more like as
far as listening,
a speech than a conversation.
Yeah, I guess. Yep, that's a good. That's a really good analogy. Yeah. I think it doesn't really require you to engage so much as just sort of sit there and listen. Kind of like a movie. Mm-hmm. Whereas I've always been much more drawn to conversation. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you something when we were talking earlier about the places where the conference was, and that is, what are some of your favorite cities? Whether it's cities to tour in or cities to see music in or cities where you've been creative.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think London is my favorite city. It's or at least it was when I first started traveling, because London was a place where everything seemed exotic, and yet going back to the idea of having to make an effort, Like there's no language barrier really, except it's the fun of, speaking in a terrible fake British accent. So, I mean, that's just entertaining. But it was sort of like London was the place where I got things I could get in America, only like these were better versions of them, like theater.
Oh yeah.
Or just language in general, literature, that kind of a thing. And so I was, or city architecture. Coming from America, it comes off as very, just wonderfully stylized and quirky.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm really glad you're on the show, because I know of the musicians, especially who are listening to this, you're a wealth of perspective in sort of creativity and music life, but also in showbiz and traveling and gigging and studio work and all this stuff. And I think about, if we're talking cities and geography here, the places that you've operated out of are all the places that musicians sometimes think, I wonder if I would ever live there, move there. I mean, you've lived in Nashville, you've lived in New York City, you've operated heavy in Boston, now you're a Midwesterner.
Yeah.
Those are, I mean, you haven't lived in LA, I take it.
I haven't.
But other than that, you've hit all the biggies.
Right.
So what did you learn in those huge musical epicenters?
Oh, nothing much. No, I just. Well, honestly, I put it down to a short attention span. Like I have what, certainly when I was younger, what felt like just this endless well of wanting to see new places and try new things. I guess that's probably the story of many people's 20-something years. But it was less. It was usually not a case of saying like, well, I think I'll move to Nashville, or I think I'll move to New York. Like there was always a reason to go. In the case of Nashville, I came across a producer who operated out of Nashville, who sort of invited me to sort of come down and live with him and his wife for a few months and sort of maybe get my feet set.
And
so there was
were
a
you
real
considering
incentive.
Like, wow, maybe this is when I become a Nashville guy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can help that thought crossing your mind. But honestly, I mean, I may have been. Maybe this is a strange response, but I wonder if I was a little too young for Nashville when I was there, because it seemed like all the business mostly happened in the bars. Like you were supposed to go out to the bars and drink beer that wasn't really all that great, and then you were supposed to try to run into people.
Yeah.
And the other thing about Nashville is that, well, it struck me as very ironic that many of the best musicians in the world live there, and almost like we were saying about Folk Alliance, it's sort of like you can have some of the best music ever played happening in these kind of rundown bars every night, but the audience is usually on the smaller side because like everyone else is trying to do the same thing, or they're out on the road with another act. You know, they're making a living that way.
Right.
And so it was almost too big of a majority, kind of like we were talking about Folk Alliance. It's sort of like there were so many people sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That it was tough. I think it's tough for anyone to stand out in a field that it's sort of like everyone is sort of doing what you're doing.
Right.
And I think if you can stand out in that field, that really says a lot about you. But I don't know. So
you didn't feel energized or inspired when you were there?
No, but that was also before I really came to appreciate how crucial it is to try to network with people. Mm-hmm. You know, like I had this idea when I was younger that if you're talking to someone and you're your end game is just to try to get a favor out of them, or get them to book you, or basically like you have some kind of personal incentive. You have an agenda. Then that was kind of schmoozy, or I think Don said oily earlier, or something like that, and I kind of recoiled from that idea.
Yeah.
Like I hated the idea that this is probably not a person who I would talk to. Yeah. Just naturally. Unless
they,
I'm only talking to them because I'm trying to get something out of them.
And they're trying to get something out of you.
And they're trying to get something out of me. But the second half of that equation, I think that would have solved it for me if I was able to say to myself, like, okay, this is what you do at conferences like this, and you yourself have something to offer that other people would be interested in. Even in the case of someone who would seem to be like in the hierarchy of the industry, would seem to be far above you. Like even someone booking a national festival, they're dependent on good music coming in and sort of some exciting new artist or something like that. And so like they certainly stand to benefit from hiring you, but I was never able to see it that way. It always felt so agenda driven.
Yeah.
So
it's sort of a kind of this weird economy subtext about like, what can you give me? What can I give you? And I always think it's not like accountants are out there meeting each other saying,
right,
I got this spreadsheet and I'd like you to take a look at it. And like, I'll take a look at yours too. But like, it's such a weird, when you get into the creative arts and you do need to collaborate with people like that, you need to find people and connect with them and collaborate, or else
It was a realization. It was a realization that I needed to get over myself, and that it's much more like we're all on the same team.
Yeah.
Like we shouldn't, and I was viewing it very competitively, like I want to be better than you, and if you have this thing that I don't have, I have this other thing that makes me better than you. And it was just very kind of mano a mano.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of a death rattle of a viewpoint, especially if you're in like the folk industry, because it's sort of like, if you don't team up, you're absolutely dead.
And that's the whole ethic of folk music.
Well, I think so. Yeah,
that's the point. It's the music of the people. That's what folk means.
But I would expand that out to many other genres as well.
Right.
It's like we're all sort of under the thumb of big media. I think in a way, like we're all just trying to get heard as independent musicians. So like the more fighting or competition that sort of muddles us up, the less impact we're able to have as bringers of what we feel is world changing art. It's like if our goal is to kind of like beat all our colleagues to the gig, to get the gig instead of them. I mean, you get the gig, and so there's sort of like a I guess there's a hollow victory in that, or what's it called, a Pyrrhic victory?
Yeah.
When you win but you don't really win.
Yeah.
And it really helped me to mature in, I guess what I saw my whole purpose as being, which eventually became like I have something to offer. I have art that I think will help people and will make their lives better.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to do, but it also makes me the ally of anyone else whose art I appreciate as well as my own, and who I think could change people's lives and make them better, that kind of a thing. So it became much more collaborative, and I was able to get over that hurdle and network more. And that's when I noticed that like almost any advancement that you'll get in your career could be traced back to some kind of networking.
Yeah.
It's like a buddy of mine put it really well. he sent me an email a couple days ago, and I was asking him about trying to place some music that I've written recently, which is very classical in nature. And so I was reaching out to him. He's a music supervisor in LA, and he was just saying like, well, you'll probably want to try to connect with a publishing house, and there's like this and there's that, and as you know, anybody who might be connected with a place like that is your best place to start, because they're a billion times more likely to listen to you if you're a friend of so-and-so. And that's really true. It's just that you think about someone who you've never heard of, as opposed to just a person who honestly does the taxes of a buddy of yours, but they also have this weird band with like a fuel horn or something, and it's like just because you know their friend,
Yep.
you'll listen to like 30 seconds of a song.
Yep. And when you need the flugelhorn on your next record, you got the guy to call him.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's amazing what a difference it makes just to know somebody.
Yeah.
Like you'll always get picked over the guy who didn't know anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
This is, listeners, oh my gosh, this is a huge lesson in what I would call the maturity in creativity. And it's hard. It's a hard lesson to learn, especially if you're kind of an idealist, or if you're an
introvert.
If you're an introvert, if you're an artiste.
So many artists are introverts, and they will shy away. They will avoid networking like the plague. I know, because I did, and do, because you'd always rather just go write another, hit song. But the problem is that no one's ever going to know it's a hit song, because you don't know anybody. Yeah. And so like you have to take a little bit of time and just try to meet people, and chances are pretty good, the artistic community is so full of introverts, like everyone else is going to be having the same struggle as you.
Yeah. What this makes me think of is the idealist or the young, or maybe the immature artist might say to themselves, this networking or this hustling feels bad. I'd rather be friends first and then collaborate with my friends, because that would feel healthy and right. But my experience is, if you're open-minded and relaxed and collaborative, friendship comes on the back end. Mm-hmm. Because then you start out as collaborators or colleagues or business affiliates, mm-hmm. but because the work we're doing is so beautiful and emotional and,
right.
and fun
right.
and fulfilling, that, what I've learned is, man, if you play a gig with someone, you're friends with them after that.
Right.
And you'll always know them, even if you don't hang out all the time. You'll always know them.
Right.
They'll always be on Facebook.
Right.
You'll always have warm feelings. You'll give them a huge hug when you see them 5 years later.
Right.
So it's so cool how, in my experience, that those warm, authentic relationships grow naturally out of making art.
I think so. I think at first it comes off as disingenuous, and you're like, the only reason I'm talking to this person is because they're connected to so and so. But if you believe that you also have something to offer, even if this person has more connections, even if they've played more shows, they're older than you, whatever it might be, like, I found the way out was to realize that we really are all on the same team.
Yeah.
It's like the people who don't need to do that because they've achieved some level of fame and notoriety. I guess they're not really on the team because they don't need to be, but the rest of us, we're all the same. We're people. We have families of some stripe. Mm-hmm. We're paying rent, or we're paying a mortgage. It's like we're all in the same boat. Like we all are united by the belief that the world is better with beautiful things in it, and so we spend as much time as we can when we get over our own self-doubt and fear and all the rest of it. And you've
risked great things.
Right.
And that's part of the community. I think that people are taking a risk and saying, instead of going sort of the more safe route,
right,
I'm going to risk this because this art that I'm making is so important to me that I'm going to choose that as the thing that I do.
Right. And I think that unites you with anyone you might talk to at a conference. You know, you don't have to feel like you're schmoozing. You can just feel like you're meeting more people on the team. You know, it's like we're all on the same team.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I think that more things happen when there's more relationship. And even though maybe it's a little bit of a strain to call it a relationship when you're just chatting someone up who books for this festival or something like that. You know, you're still talking, you're still making a social connection to somebody. And I found that really helpful. I realized I needed to get over myself and my own, what I thought was, you know, kind of like an ethical sense of authenticity or, you know, inauthenticity.
Right.
When actually I was just turning down the potential collaboration volume.
Did you have anyone, sort of a mentor or someone sort of a little farther down the path where you looked at them, or do you feel like that it just sort of had to come to you as a maturity thing? Like you had to go through enough times where you weren't doing that for the light bulb to go off?
I think the latter. I think I look back and I wish that I had been less proud because there was probably a mentor there somewhere who could have saved me time and effort.
Right.
And I've always had to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like I took 10, 15 years to figure it out instead of 2 or whatever.
Yeah. I know in my own music career, I slugged it out completely independent minded for a decade before I thought of seeking out a mentor. And the minute I sought out a mentor or a producer in that specific case, then I leapt ahead. I leapt ahead like rungs and rungs at a time.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, if only I had sought out a mentor or help or perspective from another human being 7 or 8 or 10 years earlier than that. Holy cow.
Or maybe you couldn't have because you wouldn't have known, or maybe the time was right to do it.
I had no information.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know any other people doing this work. I was a self-taught freelance musician.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and maybe now with the internet, it's better now.
Yeah.
I can learn more.
But you're also more distracted. You know, it's like there's no way to be on the internet and only do what you're trying to do. You're always being pulled toward, 7 celebrities who were child stars and who look at them now or whatever. But I find that one of the biggest paradoxes is that as an artist, you have to have this enormous amount of confidence to go and do what you do. And yet at the same time, you have to have humility to say, I think that everything I'm doing is great, but at some level, there's probably something I'm missing. I could still really stand to learn something. And I didn't think that when I was younger. I thought everything I was doing was just amazing. And now I go back and I listen and I cringe. And it's I guess that's a tough sign of maturity, but it's certainly a sign of maturity to look back and say, like, I wanted to produce myself because I wasn't willing to let anyone else suggest something that I might not agree with and have to go in that direction. And now I know that I don't know everything. I know that I know very little. It's kind of like I think the mark of a good life is as you go on, you have fewer and fewer answers and more questions. Yeah, and musically, certainly that's true. Like I'm having more fun with music now than I used to because I'm not trying to control it all. I'm not trying to run the whole show because no one can run the whole show. I think you tend to make music with a whole lot more calm at the center of it, or passion when you're only trying to control the very, very few things that are really given to you to control, and not try to be the master of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Given that would you say your primary instrument is violin, fiddle?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that to me seems like an instrument where you have to be practicing it a lot more than, like, Jonathan will sometimes go weeks probably without playing the guitar. But it seems like with something like the violin, you kind of, to keep your chops up, do you play every day? How do you keep your skills sharp? How do you keep your chops?
I don't play every day. If I could, I probably still would not play every day, because, well, it's a combination of factors. One is that I think at my core I have a lazy streak, but more than that is that I've never been drawn to, like, when I was younger, I wanted to be the best fiddler in Nashville. I idolize this guy who is still, for my money, he's the best fiddler, well, anywhere.
Yeah, who?
It's Stuart Duncan.
Oh, yeah.
So Stuart Duncan has a way of playing that is just so incredibly lyrical, and he's just a wizard with some of his ideas and the way he plays double stops and all these things. And I absolutely idolized Stuart growing up, and would just play along with anything I could get my hands on that he played, and that was my dream. And then, and I never noticed that along the way I was, totally into like a whole lot of 80s top 40 radio. And then I went to college and I got into like the Tom Petty Wildflowers album. And I was really drawn to a bigger world than just the world of the violin.
Yeah.
And so I had these skills on this specific instrument that I grew up playing. I started really young. I was not even 5 years old when I started on Suzuki. Yeah. Classical violin. So I had this very rich experience on the instrument, and I could do some wonderful things on it. But I was drawn to more than just classical violin music or bluegrass fiddle music, or I wanted more than that. Like, I wanted songs. I think I wanted to be a producer. Just because I wanted to be involved with more aspects than just in like the violin aspects. Mm-hmm. And so that's always been a little bit of a, it's interesting. I feel like I'm always sort of investigating my identity as far as the violin goes, because it's by far the easiest language for me to speak. And yet I'm also so fascinated by what you can do with like a vintage compressor, and a kick drum.
Well, you are kind of a gearhead.
Well, I'm not. I'm not, because I don't really understand the gear. I'm just
the sounds.
I'm just a sound head. Yeah, I'm sort of a sonic head. I'm an audio head, yeah. Right? Uh-huh. And those sounds can come from a violin, but they can come from anything. Right. I'm just fascinated by sound, and my ear is drawn to anything that strikes me as creative or unique or well executed, mm-hmm. or just a different color that I haven't heard. Like I guess I wasn't content with just my palette being made up of like some mostly violin and then maybe a little bit of mandolin or something like that. I wanted something mm-hmm. globally bigger than that.
What are some of your?
So that's a very long answer of
it's
a way to answer you. But
you probably listen to music every day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the best sounding albums in your opinion?
Oh goodness. Oh, that's a tough one. Well,
Wildflowers by Tom Petty.
Well, it's almost like, man, that's such a hard question. It changes as you for example, I thought I thought like there was like this fast food roast beef sandwich shop in near to where I grew up as a kid. And
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Ipswich, Massachusetts.
Okay.
So north of Boston, maybe half hour, 35 minutes, something like that. And so we would go to this roast beef shop and we would get these roast beef sandwiches. And that was just like the pinnacle of what food could be. And of course, like there's a certain kind of food that you like as a 15-year-old. But I couldn't imagine anything better than that. And now I can barely get one of those down because like I'll go, I live, half a mile from the Birchwood Cafe, say in the Longfellow neighborhood. And the stuff they're creating there is just, it'll blow your mind, and just the lust I have now for like green beans and like walnut, I'm forgetting what goes into it, but it's sort of like this savory green bean dish or whatever. It's just like stuff that I would never touch as a little kid.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with music. Like I just thought the coolest thing I'd ever heard were some of those harmonies on that Def Leppard album,
Hysteria.
Mm-hmm. I just
That's amazing harmony.
Let's see, what was it? Armageddon It?
Yeah.
Near the end of Armageddon It, like they're just doing all these like reverb drenched stuff, and like I still enjoy those, but it's the way that you enjoy that roast beef sandwich.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, oh, it's so bad for you, but it tastes so good, or something like that. But when I really think about music that makes me want to go create music or record music or something like that, you're probably going back to the glory days of the 60s, 70s, and with all that vintage gear.
Well, a lot of the stuff that you and I have talked about in our own musical collaborations has been Paul Simon. And I've noticed, I just saw today on Facebook, you posted, you're doing a whole show where you're going to play the Graceland album in its entirety.
Yeah.
That our listeners who are on the East Coast could go hear you do this at Passim, right?
At Passim, Club Passim
in
April 1st.
April 1st. So you're going to play the Graceland record.
It's not a joke.
And you're going to play it in order.
No, I'm probably not going to play it in order.
Oh, you're changing the sequence around.
That's something that I'll probably take some liberties with.
And I've always known that you are, one of the things that when we first got to know each other, that we bonded over was Paul Simon.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of fun playing his songs together.
Yeah.
And we've even played some Graceland songs together. But tell me what's going on with that record? Why does that record matter so much?
Maybe it's just to finally get it out of my system. Like I think that was one of my, people talk about the record that changed their life. And what happened was, I think my mom had a cassette tape that wasn't even like the real cassette tape, like the actual.
It was a dub.
It was a dub when we would dub cassettes, kicking around the house. And I think I found that when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, because I remember it came out in 86. And just listening to the sounds on that record, they were just unlike any I had heard up till that point. And there was just something so kind of infinite about them, and just like some of the production, like the reverbs that they used, and some of the lyrics, like a distant constellation dying in a corner of the sky, just like the way that Paul Simon's mind was sort of freed up by, because I think that he was in kind of a stagnant place himself musically,
right? Because he had
compositionally,
he had a bomb right before that. He did Hearts and Bones.
Right.
I think it was his first record with no hits,
right,
and really bad sales, and he was incredibly depressed.
Yeah. I've heard the same thing. And Hearts and Bones has some amazing tracks,
right,
as well, like Hearts and Bones,
right, but no hits.
But yeah, I guess. But anyway, he was in a. It seemed like he was in a place. Maybe I'm remembering a documentary I watched or something where he just really needed to be inspired by something that he hadn't heard before. He had sort of come to the end of his rope, musically, and I think someone gave him a tape of some of these African musicians.
Yeah.
And the sounds were just so different, and he found himself so inspired by that. And he's always just been such a natural at writing a pop song. And so now it's like he was able to write a pop song with all these different flavors that he'd never tried. And I think you hear that when you listen to the record. You hear a man who's who's like thrown off these chains.
Totally.
Like the kind of lyricizing that he's doing.
Yeah, it's
especially because the chords are all 1-4-5 chords. It's like it couldn't be simpler musically.
For him, it was. I think it's like a watershed moment in his entire career because I have read a bunch of stuff. I think it's the Songwriters on Songwriting book and some other Paul Simon interviews, and he talks about like before that record, he was a composer who wrote from melody,
right,
and after that. Right. He became a composer who wrote from rhythm.
Right. It's almost like he added a dimension to his writing with that album. Anyway, it hit me when I was 8 or 9 and just sort of forming my musical identity. Yeah. And so it soaked in on like a bone deep level. Yeah. And so it's always been like a part of my genetic musical makeup, and I've always just sort of drawn from it.
Was it your call to bring that one of those tunes to Barnstar?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Because that's part of the Barnstar album, and you do it every show.
We do it a fair amount of shows. We've got another album in the can since that one. Yeah. So, but yeah, that for me, that album is almost like a cliche. It's like people always know that I'll be doing a song from it. I can't shut up about it. And it's sort of it's really made me a lot of who I am has come from that. Wow. That record.
Yeah.
What are some other sources of inspiration when you write, or how do you write songs? Do you find that you write songs differently than you did 10 years ago, or can you start some with lyrics and some with music, or do you have a pretty systematic way of how that unfolds?
If it's anything, it's not systematic. I think I've always been, I've always shied away from looking directly at the process, and I'm sure that's why I haven't written tons and tons of songs, is because I've tried to walk that line between, like, I mean, you have to punch in every day or nothing will ever get done. And yet at the same time, I don't have, like my paperweight that sits on this corner of the desk, and I have my coffee cup over here, and I only use this kind of pen, and, just like all the stuff, like anything resembling trappings. Like I try to keep moving, figuratively speaking, and never get into any kind of rut in terms of the way I'm composing. Like I'll try to compose on different instruments. Mm-hmm. And you can get vastly different results with different instruments. I mean, even different guitars, you'll get different ideas out of them. Mm-hmm. And there's also something there that I hope is humble, which is sort of like a I don't know if I describe it this way, but maybe someone else might describe it as sort of submitting yourself to the mystery, where you believe very deeply that something like songwriting or something like art is much bigger than you are. And so you kind of you just sort of come before it and ask to be you ask to be allowed a glimpse into beauty or into something true, because these things exist apart from you, and you're just hoping to catch something quick as it goes by, because there's so much static in our lives, and when we see something, we never really see it that clearly because we're only human, and so I think when you participate in an act of creation, you're doing something that the gods do, like you're trying to engage in a divine activity. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, you have your own flesh that's always going to sort of be getting in your way, and it's going to be clouding whatever you're seeing. And you just do your best to see what you can, despite that. Mm-hmm. And one of the best ways is to try to be really humble about it, and to be really forgiving of yourself. Like I'll find that it usually takes like 20 minutes, maybe a half hour of kind of writing things down that are like actively terrible, like just boring, hackneyed ideas. And I keep writing them down anyway, because like no one else has to see them, and all I'm wasting is like ink and paper, and there's lots of that. And so you just sort of write down through the crap.
It's like the first pancake.
Right.
Like the first pancake is always misshapen.
It's always
not quite cooked through, but
exactly.
you have to make the first pancake.
You have to make
so
the first
that you
one.
Get to the rest of them. Yeah.
You're so right.
Yeah.
And I make a lot of pancakes, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Or I think of like excavation, if you're trying to dig out a dinosaur skeleton or something like that. Like you're going down through these layers of, impacted rubble and whatever, and it's just you're not going to get anything, and you keep writing anyway. And then you pull up this shining piece of something, and maybe it's like one word or a couple of words, or you get a whole phrase or a sentence.
You get the vein of minerals, or tap tap tap.
And you see it, and you realize that you've done something good, and I think at the same moment you have a realization that like you were only partly involved with what just happened. Like this good thing. You were there, you participated, but it didn't come from you exactly. I mean, you were the only one writing, but it's sort of like it was given to you. It's more like a gift, I think. And that's a wonderful feeling. It keeps you, it grounds you, it keeps you humble. And I think it's the right attitude to know that like no one owns beauty, no one owns the truth. But if you are devoted, sometimes you're allowed to look on it for a second, and almost by accident you realize you're seeing something really important, and then you try to write it down before it's gone, and you do the best job you can writing it down. Like,
and then you get to share it with other people.
And then you share it with other people.
Very generous act.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole purpose.
Yeah,
it's like it would be no good. I mean, it'd be sort of like celebrating Christmas by yourself. Like you just give yourself all these gifts, but the real joy is realizing beforehand how much this person would enjoy this thing. Like you have this thought like, oh, they would love, the new Calvin and Hobbes book or something like that. Well, there is no new one, but like this person and their personality and how much they'd enjoy this thing that you thought of. And that's the best part of Christmas is when you see the reaction you've been hoping for, and the person is like, oh, this is what a great idea. This is exactly what I like. Yeah. That kind of a thing. Yeah. And it's the same thing when you discover something true. You don't feel a sense of ownership, I think, if you've discovered it in the right way. You just feel a sense of like, oh, I'll bet people would love to hear about this. I'll bet their lives would be better.
Yeah. You're kind of stewarding the
almost curation or stewarding. Yeah. That kind of a thing.
Have you ever dreamed a song, or have you ever had a song come to you like so quickly that you think, oh my gosh, I have to write this down right now? Like it just arrives as like a perfectly formed, like it's already the fifth pancake. Has that happened to you creatively?
Yeah, both of those things have actually. Cool. There was one song.
Can you tell us a little more about?
It was a song I dreamed. It's actually on this record you've got. I decided to include it, even though it definitely could never fall into the category of like a hit, because it's like 7 minutes long. But it's a song called "The Tower of Babel," or "Tower of Babel," and I was dreaming. I talk about this in the liner notes. I was just sort of dreaming some of these images of a very apocalyptic type, like bleak, totally annihilated kind of landscape, sort of desert like, and the whole idea for the song kind of grew out of that, and there was a tie in there to I guess I would say, as a general term, I would just call it technology. But the idea was that people were growing apart, away from relationship with each other, and toward a kind of a total like zonkness with their devices and various just all the distractions we have. And how I feel like community used to look different than it does now. And of course things change, and that's part of life. But it was a kind of grieving of how separated and individualized it seems like the society has become. I mean, even what we're doing right now, I don't feel like this really happens much anymore. I'm sure that's part of why you're doing it.
That's the beauty of podcasts.
Yeah, I think so. And so it was trying to look at that, and I really started to have some fun with the language and describing this almost like a kraken, however you say it, type beast is in the song. This character is in the song, and well, anyway, like
unleash the kraken.
Yeah, release the kraken.
Release the kraken.
So I had some fun with that, and that really did sort of come from a dream, from dreams that I was having.
Boy, and you have a lot of Greek mythology images in your music.
Yeah. Well, I was totally enamored with that. I had a season of just being really into that. I loved how they kind of had a story for everything that sort of worked out, and that's where the song Ithaca came from. But to answer your other question, that Porto, Portugal song was one that came very quickly. Sometimes songs will come like that. I find, especially when it's sort of like if you are, if you've ever tried like training for a long distance run, like a marathon or a half marathon or something like that, and you're pretty deep into the training, you'll be walking around one day and you'll just notice like how easily your body is doing everything because you're in such amazing shape. And sometimes, and I have been in seasons of being in amazing musical shape, where I've just been playing a lot of shows or been writing a lot of songs. I'm kind of in one of those seasons, and the ideas come much more easily. It's or if you do a lot of yoga, and you'll notice that like, you just, it won't, your body will, when you're not in the class and you're just doing things around the house, like you'll have a much easier time living. It's sort of like your body has been stretched and all the toxins have been like sweated out of it or whatever. And it's just like things are easier. And the same thing can sort of happen musically. I think if you do a lot of musical yoga, you can sit down and sort of get in the zone more easily.
Well, your muscles, your creative muscles are more in shape.
Yeah, they're more in shape. Exactly.
Writing a lot. Cool.
Yeah. I try to say everything in a very long way, but that's a better way to say
great.
it.
It's very descriptive. It's very helpful.
I always enjoy hanging out with you because you feel like you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of depth of tasty tidbits for me to think about, and it's always fun when we've had a chance to go on tour, because then we can just like drive in the car all day and just talk and listen to music. And it's the last time we did a driving trip, the podcast had just started, our show, and I kept thinking in my head quietly, like, we should be taping this conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's just such...
what were we talking about? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Well, I do. And you said something that really struck me. I think about it all the time. And, and one of the things that's been fun to have you back in Minnesota now for 3 years or whatever, because we met long ago, and then you moved away for a while.
Right.
And then you came back.
Right.
And so now that you've been back, it's been nice to have you around, because then we can actually collaborate and play music and stuff.
You're not afraid that I'm just going to pick up and leave?
Yeah. You seem a little bit more settled here now than you did the first time.
Well, things have...
you've had a lot of new development.
There's a mortgage in my life.
And some diapers.
Boy. Yeah. So,
but
these are domesticating elements.
Our discussions, I kept thinking, I wish the tape was rolling, because this stuff is so great. And the other thing that's fun to hanging out with you is that, and this is why listeners that it's great that Jake Armerding's the guest, because your career is really extraordinary, and your resume is outrageously cool. And I'm always amazed, because you don't talk about your resume in your normal life, but because I'm a music nerd and I have a big record collection and I'm on the internet a lot, I discover things that you've done or that you're doing that I didn't even know, even though I've known you for a long time. And I think, holy cow, Jake's doing this too. And so I think, man, I know there are a lot of listeners who would have a million questions to ask you. And one of the things that I really like about hanging out with you is that you have a tone about the way you operate your music career that is highly professional.
Thanks
and I'm not sure if that's just because, I don't know if it's just naturally the way you are as a human being, or maybe it's a decision that you made deliberately, or maybe it's an East Coast thing that I don't understand. Or maybe it's a combination of all that stuff.
I think it's probably a combination. I mean, I do make an effort to be, as a professional, I try to be professional. I think one thing I've noticed, and it's been interesting trying to sort of navigate it, is just on a shallow level, like in terms of wardrobe, like a dress code.
This is the topic in the car.
You
just guessed it. This is what I've been thinking about. So yes, please finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a little bit of a different school as far as stage dress. One band I'm in, a sort of a bluegrass, eclectic bluegrass band called Barnstar. Now we all wear suits when we play, and that sort of, a part of it is just wanting to be well attired, and that really fits with our image. But it also sort of harkens back to some of the first bluegrass bands, and even some today.
Oh yeah, it's the Bill Monroe tradition.
The Bill Monroe tradition. They would all wear suits. Yep. It was very. They were very well dressed, well attired, and so that was sort of a thing in that world. And then I guess I kind of came up that way, whatever music I was playing. There was always like a desire to like, people are paying money for this show.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you look nice?
Right.
And I don't mean look stiff, like you have to wear like dress pants with pleats in them or anything like that, but just like they're paying money to see you look nice, and unless the whole idea of the show is to look some other way, right? Which like if I go
like Jimmy Buffett or something,
sure, that's a great
shorts
example.
and a t-shirt, right?
Exactly. Like if he came out in a suit, people would be, they wouldn't have as much fun.
Exactly.
Like they'd kind of be turned off by it,
right?
But I think 9 times out of 10, nobody minds if you're wearing a nice suit or something like that. I mean, I usually find myself splitting the difference, and I'll do sort of like a vest and a Oxford shirt or something like that. And again, you don't want to look like you're going to like a formal or something, or a prom, but you're just looking nice because you're doing something on a stage professionally,
right?
No,
we're talking about wardrobe and clothes, but I think that's just one example of how you run the Jake Armerding show as a whole.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about your musicianship. I'm talking about your the way you carry yourself as a physical person, the way you speak on the microphone, the way you interact with other people. And I always remember when I think when anyone meets you, the sense I would think is that they would get is that Jake is not screwing around.
Right.
And I love that. And I'm not, and I don't think it's in an intimidating way or an off-putting way.
Yeah.
But I think there's a seriousness to it. There's the deliberateness to it. And to me, I'm energized by that. Because I think Jake is not screwing around, and I feel better about my own self.
Yeah.
And so that's just, and this is so nitpicky showbiz crap, but I love to talk about it, and I think it's so practical.
I think it makes a difference.
Totally.
It's just a little thing, and I think
Absolutely.
I internalized a lot of that growing up, playing in my dad's band. You know, that was the approach they took, and they weren't full time as a band. They were part time and would go out, you know, mostly on weekends. Mm-hmm. But again, I guess it comes down to, like, someone once described. I asked when I was much younger. I think I asked someone what a professional was. Maybe it was my dad, and he said, "Well, you know, by definition, a professional is someone who makes money at something. Like that's what distinguishes a professional from you know, a hobbyist or a volunteer or whatever."
Yep.
And that's a little bit of a facile definition. I mean, I would say that a lot more goes into professionalism than just money, but maybe it goes back to the idea of money, that people are spending their money to be entertained, to have their life changed a little bit, that kind of a thing. And so you have a responsibility, you know, like it obligates you to be a professional. They're paying you to be a professional. And I think that kind of seeps into everything from what you might choose to wear to whether or not you're prepared to play the show, you know, whether you've got a basic set list in mind, and whether you can get from song to song without people feeling uncomfortable, like you don't know what to say.
The kind of gear you have.
The kind of gear you have, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
This is so practical. Oh, it makes me so excited just to talk about it. Here's my own journey in this has been so weird, and I feel like even though this is my 25th anniversary, I still struggle with this because my early learnings my musical roots are being a summer camp counselor. You know, playing guitar and singing for a bunch of youth around a campfire in the woods. You know, that's how I learned to play and how to perform. And when you're doing that, the ethic behind it is you and me are the same. I am one of you,
right? And
you could do this,
right?
And so the whole point of it in those early days was to say there is no wall between the guy with the guitar and the people listening, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of where that was my starting point.
Yeah.
And so I think even though that's a beautiful image and the right attitude for the campfire, it's not as functional when you're a performer.
It breaks down, in the because why would they be paying you?
Exactly.
You know?
Oh, this is so helpful.
Yeah.
So I remember as my own career got going, I had a chance to play shows with Becky Hemingway, who was much more experienced than me in sort of being a rock star.
Sure.
And in the best way, not in a annoying way.
Right.
And I remember being in Becky's band and playing some big shows with big production and equipment, gear, and a big audience or whatever. And I would remember she's very striking and beautiful, and it's just like a fashionable, cool person.
Right.
And I would remember her getting ready for shows and like choosing her wardrobe and like doing her hair and like cool, like intense lipstick.
Yeah.
And she just looked like $1 million, and she cared. She really cared about it. And it totally worked, and because she was so dynamic and so commanding and so fun to watch.
Right.
And she just killed it, like the shows. And I just remembered, oh my gosh, I need to step it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think there's a really important element of mystique that people, maybe they don't even realize how much they want it or come to expect it.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important. It's sort of like you have anywhere from like 10 to 1,000 people sitting there watching one other person. Like, why would all these people come and watch this one person unless there wasn't a basic belief that they had that they had something to offer that none of these people really had.
Right.
And does it make them, him or her, does it make him or her better as a person?
Right.
Of course not.
No.
But but for this 2 hours, it does sort of make them people are paying money to see a little bit of a super person.
Yeah.
It's sort of like there is a and art and entertainment, I think, are so often overly romanticized and they're given maybe too much credit. Just because a person is gifted or they've spent the time, to write a song or something like that. Like we're willing to give them, I don't know, like celebrities who should wind up in jail and don't. It's sort of like we're so enamored with their gifts that we sort of give them a free pass as far as life goes, and that's when maybe the mystique goes bad. But I also think there's a good side of it, which is that we love to come and celebrate a gift or a piece of art that has changed us in a way, and we'll pay money to see that, either to see it reenacted in a music concert, or whatever it might be. And I think it's such an interesting time that we live in, because I think that so much of that mystique is being lost by the great leveler of the internet and things like things like social media, where you have a Facebook account and I have a Facebook account, and people and everyone has a Facebook account, and you can just as easily find my account as you can find your best friend's, and so it's like we're all the same on Facebook, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I also feel like it has a strange kind of like a destructive quality to that precious kind of mystique.
Yeah.
Not that you're saying like, well, I don't want anyone to know about my life because my life is special, and these other people's lives. Because I'm
so great, and you're so horrible.
I'm so great, and wouldn't you like to have my life and whatever? And that's kind of how celebrities get made. And I have zero interest in that. But I also like the idea of just preserving a certain distance between an artist and an audience.
Yeah.
And that they don't know everything about an artist, because I think it can hurt the art.
Yeah.
Like if you're following some artist on Facebook, and the artist feels the need because people, it's like they do want to know everything,
right?
And so this artist
is saying like
they
want to know.
They think they do.
Yeah.
It makes them happy to sort of get inside the life of an artist, and you see an artist making these very mundane posts of like this is what I did this morning, and you're thinking to yourself like, well, I do that every morning, or like that's a terrible choice of breakfast food, or whatever it is, and suddenly the artist is so human, but not in a way that feels vulnerable, and more in a way that feels boring, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
And very everyday.
It's the line between vulnerability and boredom.
Yeah. I guess so. I don't know if I'm saying it that well, but the point is that like suddenly this artist is just like you, and you thought you'd be happy to learn that, but somehow you wish that you hadn't discovered that. Like you wanted them to be off in this other place creating the art they create, and it's such a fine line, like I said, between that and sort of an overly romanticized view of what an artist is. But I like that distance. I don't feel like we should know everything about each other.
Wow.
I feel like there should be, it's not a privacy exactly, it's just that art is such a fragile thing, that you just don't want anything to distract you from enjoying what that art is. Wow. And part of the fun of experiencing a work of art is to wonder about its creator and maybe what was going through their mind when they created the work of art, and the work of art should be about itself and not about the artist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a fun part of the journey.
Yeah.
To think like, wow, what in the world made them think of that? I'd really like to meet them someday and ask them that or something. And then when you read this post, that's kind of like, man, I had to take out the recycling today, and I slipped and I fell. Whatever it would be. That's just like everybody else.
Right.
Maybe it detracts from that art a little bit in some way.
Yeah.
Because like the distance is gone.
Yeah.
And the artist is just that guy next door who kind of annoys you or something.
When we had this conversation in the car when we were driving, I remember thinking, and even right now, I'm having physical sensations because I realize you're talking about this without any. You're totally unabashed. You're talking about this completely without any shame. Mm-hmm. And I love that, and I find myself being so like,
my wife says it all the
preach
time.
it, man, preach it,
Yeah.
But I know that and it feels so good to have permission to speak that or to hear a human being say those words to me, speaking as Jonathan, the real guy. And I know that inside myself, I have a slight feeling of shame. A tinge. Thank you, Don. A tinge of shame about this idea that maybe there could be a separation between the artist and the audience. Mm-hmm. And I have that, I think I've been a little bit brainwashed by my camp counselor upbringing.
Yeah.
And that it has, and I know that I'm guilty of it as a performer because I know that I underestimate my audience, and I don't give them enough credit, and I bend over backwards, quadruple in order to come down to be equal. We have to be the same. We have to I know that I can trust them. I don't have to pander
and that
as much.
A little distance is a nice thing because it creates a little bit of scarcity.
Right. So it's so good for me because this is my own struggle as a performer.
Well, you'll hear actors, actually, I was just thinking this, listening to you, I thought of how I've read about actors saying that they really make an effort to keep a low profile because they don't want something in their public life, like some party they were at or something like that, to take away from a character they might be playing on the screen. Like if you're trying to watch this movie and experience the characters without any distraction, to really get lost in the story of the film, but all you can think about is this actor who's playing this character because this actor did this thing that made headline news because it was really sordid or really weird or whatever it was. You can't really get into the story because you're being distracted by this actor who's supposed to disappear into his character.
Supposed to disappear.
You can't suspend your disbelief.
You can't suspend your disbelief.
They ruined it.
You're locked into the real world and you can't escape because of just because this actor chose to sort of make headlines in a way that had nothing to do with this film. Yeah. And that's kind of a shame that you can't. It's sort of ruined the film for you.
I wonder if those of us who perform on stage in a musical world could think about it that way. Like maybe if we don't think about it this way, we try a new perspective and we say, what can I do to disappear into the song a little bit more?
Right.
And maybe that would be helpful
to serve the art,
to serve the song if I disappeared a little bit.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have to go off the deep end, but you could experiment like, how could I behave a little differently on stage? How could I structure the show itself?
Yeah.
You could experiment even in little incremental ways
to
see your banter.
You could change your banter.
Totally. And I wonder if you might start seeing differences in the audience's attention, differences in their how much merchandise they purchase after the show.
Sure.
I think that would be a worthy experiment.
Right. Well, like I was like I was kind of alluding to it, talking about my writing process, but like if the art really is bigger than yourself, then you're trying to shine a light on the art and not yourself. And so you're trying to get yourself out of the way, really. And so I don't know, I've always been more drawn to that approach. I mean, it's always so tempting to just sort of idolize a person like Paul McCartney, right? Because he's just so amazing, and he did these things, and he was in the Beatles, and he was in the Beatles, yeah, you think? But just, like Paul McCartney, the man, has almost eclipsed what he's done musically, just because I don't know how you could be more famous.
He's the most famous musician on the earth.
Right. I think probably. And, it's like if I were to go to a Paul McCartney concert, a big reason would just be to see
his body,
human being, this biped, whose name is Paul McCartney, who did these things,
right?
Like it would just be to be near him, in the same room with him,
right?
Who's so famous,
right?
Who is the only person who is Paul McCartney, right? And I mean, I'll never be like that. So maybe that's why my mind goes to this other place. But it's just I would rather that it be about the art itself.
Yeah.
I think it would be less pressure. Like Paul McCartney can handle everyone needing him to be Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
But I don't think I could handle everyone needing me to be this famous person. I would rather try to let the art speak for itself, because it's much better than I am.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, I think maybe, Jake, the reason you're on the show today is for me to sit here and listen to that. And hopefully the listeners enjoy it too.
Well,
but yeah, this is just
you for the mouthpiece.
This is really good perspective for me in my own story, for sure. And at this stage of my life, I don't know, Dawn, what are you thinking about over there?
Well, I just really appreciate hearing about people's creative process, and sort of taking that step of saying, like, it's me, but it's not really me. Like, and that some people call it the universe is, sending a song your way, and you're the one who pulls it down,
right.
It's the muse. But I just so appreciate people sort of saying it's beyond the scope of my physical body and my brain, and getting up every morning and writing for 2 hours. Or that.
Well, if I'm honest with myself, I know that I have seen the song I've seen myself get more involved and sort of less involved with the creative process, and it's always the stuff that I'm less involved with that I look back and I'm kind of like, wow, that really touched on something real. I just feel so blessed that I was there, that I was a part of it. And it's the stuff that I kind of like pin to the ground and wrestle to the ground, and like I put my knees on its elbows and just like hold it there and say, no, this is what you're going to be. You're going to be about this. You're going to sound like that. And, I've got something that I'm trying to say here. It's just like every time I do that, it just turns out sounding like overworked. Yeah. And, well, like you beat something into submission, which just does not, like when you listen to something like that, it's not inspiring. Mm-hmm. So I try to espouse the former approach.
Yeah.
Dawn's going to ask you a question to tie it up, but before she does, I wanted to have you get a chance to tell the listeners how you want to be reached by them after they've gotten to know you in this conversation. Like you have a big tour coming up, Bar and Star.
Yep.
So
right. Yep.
We can come hear that band. Maybe do a quickie, like where are you guys going to be and what are you doing?
Yeah, sure. We're going out with Josh Ritter, who's a wonderful songwriter.
You're the openers for him?
We're supporting his tour for 6 dates through the Southeast mainly. So we start out in Durham. And then
we'll post this show soon so that it'll go up before.
Oh, great.
So that if people are listening and they're in the Southeast or on the East Coast, they can.
Yeah, Barnstar is a force to be reckoned with. I don't know that we've finished a show and people have walked away saying like, oh, I wish it'd been better or something like that. Like
Nobody's lukewarm.
No,
It's
no.
bluegrass.
I can say that because I'm only 20% of what
Yeah.
goes on. It's a great band. It's
Great.
really fun and people get really excited for it.
Great.
So anyway, so we start out in Durham and then we go to Atlanta and some of these shows are already sold out, I think. And then Nashville, Louisville, and Cincinnati. I don't know if that was 6 shows, but anyway.
Okay.
So you could try to catch one of those, but Barnstar we're doing 3 more dates. We're playing in New York City on March 11th. We're playing the Rockwood Music Hall, Stage 2.
All right.
On March 11th. So you could, if you are in New York and listening, you can catch that. That should be great. And then we're doing an afternoon show at Club Besseem, the same venue that I mentioned that I'm doing the Paul Simon show.
Graceland, yeah.
We're playing a noon show, not noon. It's a 3 p.m. show at Club Besseem on Sunday, March 13th.
One of the most legendary music venues really in the world.
Right.
Yep.
It's sort of one of the original folk clubs.
Yeah, folk clubs.
Cool.
In the country. And then I've got this April 1st show at the same venue. But if there's, I guess if I were to give a link, I would link to my newest website, which is Stick Shift Records.
I just went there today for the first time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, because I saw it listed in your new record. Why don't you say a couple things about your compilation record, too?
All right. Well, this is the kind of record that an artist puts out when they have enough. They've released enough sort of solo CDs to have amassed a kind of greatest hits record, but maybe they didn't have any, greatest hits. So you call it a collection. But it's a compilation of some of the best stuff from the last 10 years.
And that's available at the stickshifrecords.com.
Stickshifrecords.com.
You can get it. The downloads are there. You could order the physical CD.
Right. You could go physical or digital, whatever your pleasure.
And it's a great introduction to you as the artist because it is an overview of your 15 years as a solo artist.
I actually worked hard on it. It's you'd think it would just be a case of cherry picking songs from albums and then just throwing them together and voila, you have an album. But I actually went back and the way I put it was I kind of George Lucas'd a lot of the songs.
Sure.
I went back and
In the best way.
in a good way, I hope.
Yeah.
Not in a Phantom Menace type way.
Well, you have technology on your side now, maybe in a way that you didn't have
so
10 years ago.
I had sort of archived most of what I had done over the last 10 or 15 years, and so I went back and, for example, there's one song called "Song of Solomon" that I had my dad sing a duet vocal with me. My dad's got this great voice, but I always felt like it would be better a part sung better by a female duet vocal. And there's a wonderful band called Red Molly and a singer in that band named Molly Venter, whose voice just it just really moves me. And when I got a chance to hang out with her and do some singing with her, I knew that I'd try to get her on that song if I ever released it again. So through the miracle of technology, I had her come in and sort of redo that part. And so it seems like almost every song has something like that about it. I went back and had a special guest on it that I didn't have before or whatever. So it's got a lot of great stuff. And it's long too. It's 17 songs. And there's a couple of live tracks too.
Do you drive a stick shift?
I don't anymore. I did before I was married, and then my wife started having like sciatic nerve problems with driving a standard shift automobile, so we had to switch over.
Okay.
But my heart and soul is still with the stick shift.
Nice. Well, my question for you is, what would you tell your kindergarten self?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess it would be something along the lines of let other people help you. Try to get where you're going. Kind of the stuff that we've talked about over the last hour. Just don't be so closed to the idea that other people might have something to offer.
Well, thanks so much for being on Creativity Drill.
Thank you for
That
having
was
me.
a great talk. Listeners, thank you for listening. Go see Jake Armerding. He's on the road like crazy, and he's awesome. And we love you. See you later. Bye.
Creativity.